Austere, where the real story begins after the camera stops rolling, the truth and TLC.
Kody and Robyn stand alone. But is that the whole story? For years, the foundation of Sister Wives was built on one promise: unity. No matter the conflict, no matter the jealousy, no matter the tension, this family would endure. But today, the landscape looks completely different. The plural marriage that once defined the Brown family has unraveled, and now only one legal marriage remains: Kody Brown and Robyn Brown. On the surface, it seems simple. 3 wives left. 1 wife stayed. The story appears finished. But is it? Because when you look closer, when you really sit with the silence between the interviews, the pauses during confessionals, the body language during tense conversations, you start to realize something feels unfinished, almost unresolved. For over a decade on Sister Wives, viewers watched Kody navigate 4 marriages. He spoke about fairness, loyalty, structure, leadership. He emphasized the importance of respect. He framed plural marriage as a higher calling, something bigger than emotion. Yet one by one, that structure collapsed. Christine walked away first, and when she did, many thought it was a single fracture, a painful one, but isolated. Then Janelle followed, signaling something deeper than marital tension. And finally, Meri, whose emotional distance had been visible for years, officially closed the chapter. And suddenly, what once looked like a complex but functioning system became something else entirely. Now Kody and Robyn stand alone. But here's where it gets interesting. If the original dream was about plural unity, what does it mean that the final outcome resembles monogamy? Was this the natural evolution of a broken structure? Or was it always leaning in this direction? Fans have debated for years whether Robyn was favored, whether decisions increasingly centered around her household, whether financial choices, housing moves, and emotional energy gradually shifted toward one wife over the others. But favoritism is only one layer of this story. There's also power. When a plural family dissolves, what remains isn't just emotional fallout. It's financial entanglement, property division, and long-term consequences. The sale and restructuring of Coyote Pass marked more than just the end of a real estate plan. It symbolized the end of a shared future. And yet, even as the land dream faded, Kody and Robyn remained legally bound. Strategically stable, still aligned. Some viewers see that as loyalty. Others see it as consolidation. Because when 3 partnerships dissolve and one survives, it raises uncomfortable questions. Was that final marriage simply the strongest? Or was it the center of gravity all along? Watch closely during recent seasons. The tone has changed. The defensiveness feels sharper. The justifications feel heavier. There's less talk of principle and more talk of betrayal. Less emphasis on faith and more emphasis on respect demanded rather than earned. Kody appears more isolated, but also more entrenched. Robyn appears more emotional, but also more protected. And protection is a fascinating theme here. Over the years, Robyn was often portrayed as misunderstood, sensitive, targeted unfairly by jealousy and miscommunication. But now, with the other wives gone, that dynamic has shifted. There are no sister wives left to create contrast, no competing perspectives under the same marital structure, which means the spotlight lands differently. Without the plural format, to diffuse attention, the marriage between Kody and Robyn stands exposed. No buffer, no shared narrative shield. And that's where things feel complicated. Because standing alone can mean strength, but it can also mean accountability. If the original family dream collapsed, who carries that weight? Was it incompatibility, ego, financial strain, pandemic policies, emotional neglect, or something that was slowly building long before cameras captured it? Sometimes the end of a system reveals truths that were impossible to see while it was functioning. And that's what makes this moment so compelling. The Brown family once presented plural marriage as a united front. Now the only remaining marriage exists in the shadow of 3 exits. Is that survival? Or is that the final stage of a long transformation that viewers sensed years ago? The biggest question isn't whether Kody and Robyn are still together. It's whether the version of plural marriage they defended was already collapsing from within long before anyone said the words, "I'm leaving." Because when the dust settles and the family tree reshapes itself, what remains often tells the real story. And right now, what remains is 2 people, 1 marriage, and a long list of unanswered questions. If you're ready to go deeper into what those questions reveal and what subtle clues may have been hiding in plain sight, press continue. When you strip away the idea of plural marriage, what you're left with is something far more personal. A relationship dynamic under pressure. For years, the plural structure allowed tension to be redistributed. If one wife was upset, attention shifted elsewhere. If one household felt strained, another storyline filled the gap. The format itself created balance, even when the emotions didn't. But now that balance is gone. With only Kody and Robyn remaining, there's no diffusion of conflict, no shifting of responsibility, no comparison point inside the marriage structure. Every decision, every frustration, every disappointment exists within one space. And that kind of pressure reveals things. In earlier seasons, Kody often spoke about leadership. He framed himself as the head of the family, someone guiding multiple households. But leadership inside a plural marriage is very different from partnership inside a monogamous one. In plural marriage, authority can be reinforced by structure. In monogamy, authority must be replaced with mutual accountability. That transition is not small. When Christine left, Kody's reaction wasn't just sadness, it was shock. Not because conflict didn't exist, but because control shifted. For the first time, a wife didn't negotiate her unhappiness. She simply exited. Then Janelle's separation reinforced the pattern, and Meri's formal end quietly sealed it. 3 independent decisions, 3 women choosing autonomy. And now the dynamic between Kody and Robyn stands in an entirely different light. For years, critics argued that Robyn was the emotional center of the family, that her needs shaped decisions, that her home became the priority during critical moments. Those claims were debated endlessly. But now, with the plural system dissolved, the question becomes sharper. What happens when the center becomes the whole? Because being the favored wife in a plural system is one role, being the only wife in a fractured system is another entirely. Robyn once described wanting the big family, the porch, the shared holidays, the vision of unity, yet that vision didn't materialize. Instead, what remains is a much smaller household and a public narrative filled with loss. That has emotional consequences. There's also the financial layer, often discussed but rarely fully unpacked. Plural families function as economic ecosystems, multiple incomes, shared investments, property strategies. When that ecosystem collapses, restructuring becomes unavoidable. Coyote Pass was more than land. It was shared commitment. When that commitment dissolved, so did the symbolism. The property no longer represented a shared future. It represented division, and division forces clarity. The remaining marriage now operates without the broader financial structure that once connected 4 households. That changes everything. It changes risk. It changes long-term planning. It changes public perception. Which brings us to perception. For over a decade, viewers watched a narrative about unconventional love, about faith, about navigating jealousy with communication. That narrative evolved into something darker: miscommunication, resentment, emotional abandonment. Now, with only 1 marriage remaining, the show's entire identity has shifted. Is it still about plural marriage? Or is it about the aftermath of plural marriage? Because those are two very different stories. Kody once positioned himself as someone balancing four hearts. Now he balances one, and perhaps the weight of three departures. That kind of shift can create either introspection or defensiveness. In recent interviews and episodes, there's a noticeable sharpness in tone, a sense of frustration at being misunderstood, a narrative of betrayal. But here's the deeper question: can three independent exits be reduced to misunderstanding? At some point, patterns become undeniable. When multiple people describe feeling unheard, unseen, or emotionally deprioritized, the story stops being about individual conflict. It becomes about structure. And if the structure failed, then the remaining marriage isn't just surviving, it's existing in the shadow of that failure. That shadow matters, because public perception has changed. The sympathy that once surrounded the family's struggle now splits sharply. Some viewers see Kody and Robyn as victims of wives who gave up. Others see them as the core that caused the fracture. The truth may exist somewhere in between. But what makes this moment fascinating is that there is no longer a plural narrative to hide behind. There are no sister wives to absorb blame or redirect conflict. There is simply one marriage, exposed in its entirety. And exposure changes things. When you no longer compare one relationship to three others, you start asking different questions. Questions about communication, about accountability, about growth. Is this marriage thriving, or is it simply the last one standing? Because those are not the same thing. And as the show continues, or potentially transforms, the focus naturally narrows. The story can no longer revolve around plural logistics. It must revolve around emotional reality. Which means the next chapter may not be about what was lost, but about what remains. And what remains can reveal more than what fell apart. If you're ready to explore the subtle clues hidden in behavior, interviews, and decisions that might hint at where this story is really heading, press continue. Let's talk about the subtle clues. Because sometimes what isn't said speaks louder than any dramatic confrontation. Over the years, viewers became experts at reading between the lines. A pause during a confessional. A shift in posture during a reunion. A sentence that starts strong but ends uncertain. In a show built on family unity, body language often told a different story long before words did. And now, with only one marriage left, those clues feel amplified. When multiple relationships dissolve, it forces reflection, publicly or privately. But what's striking is that we haven't seen a sweeping moment of accountability. There hasn't been a clear, vulnerable admission of, "We built this wrong." Instead, the narrative often circles around loyalty, respect, and betrayal. That framing matters. Because if three women independently conclude that the structure no longer serves them, the story isn't just about conflict, it's about incompatibility at a systemic level. And that leads to a deeper question. Was plural marriage ever the core strength of this family? Or was it the very pressure point that eventually cracked it open? In early seasons, the family sold viewers on cooperation, shared childcare, shared holidays, shared decision-making. The message was, this works because we work. But as seasons progressed, cooperation became negotiation. Negotiation became resentment. Resentment became distance. And distance, over time, becomes irreversible. Now that the plural structure is gone, the spotlight shifts entirely onto the remaining partnership. And here's where things get psychologically complex. When a system collapses, the last remaining piece can feel both victorious and burdened. Victorious because it survived, burdened because it carries the weight of everything that failed. For Robyn, that weight must be immense. For years, she was often positioned, fairly or unfairly, as the wife who received more time, more attention, more protection. With the other wives gone, that perception doesn't disappear. It intensifies. There's no comparison anymore. No balancing narrative. Just one marriage under a microscope. And that microscope doesn't only focus on the present, it rewinds the past. Fans reanalyze old episodes. They revisit early moves. They question financial decisions. They revisit moments when one wife felt sidelined and another appeared prioritized. Patterns look clearer in hindsight, but hindsight can also distort. It's possible that what viewers interpreted as favoritism was simply compatibility. It's possible that emotional alignment naturally pulled Kody closer to one household over time. It's possible that the other marriages dissolved because the emotional bond had already weakened beyond repair. But if that's true, then the original promise of equal love was flawed from the beginning. Plural marriage demands emotional balance. If one relationship grows while others stagnate, imbalance isn't just likely, it's inevitable. And imbalance breeds tension. What we're witnessing now may not be a shocking twist. It may be the natural end of a slow evolution that began years ago. Which raises another uncomfortable thought. Did the show itself prolong relationships that had already ended emotionally? Reality television creates incentives, contracts, public expectations, financial structures. When your family is also your career, leaving isn't just emotional, it's economic. That complicates timing. Perhaps some of these separations didn't happen suddenly. Perhaps they happened quietly, years before the official announcements. And if that's the case, then what we're seeing now isn't collapse, it's delayed honesty. Delayed honesty changes the tone of everything. Because when truth surfaces slowly, it often feels like betrayal to those who believed the original story. Now consider the future. If the show continues, what is its identity? It can no longer revolve around plural unity. It must revolve around aftermath, reinvention, or introspection. Will Kody and Robyn lean into rebuilding a new narrative, one of resilience and growth? Or will defensiveness dominate, framing the exits as disloyalty rather than reflection? The direction they choose will define the next chapter. There's also something else happening beneath the surface: power recalibration. In a plural structure, power dynamics are layered. Attention is divided. Influence shifts. But in monogamy, power becomes direct. There are no additional spouses to buffer disagreement. That means communication patterns either strengthen or fracture further. We haven't yet seen the long-term effects of that recalibration. But we will, because pressure reveals authenticity. And authenticity, once exposed, cannot be reshaped by editing alone. So here we are. One marriage remains. 3 have ended. The land dream is gone. The family structure has transformed. And yet the story feels unfinished. Not because we're waiting for another wife to leave, but because we're waiting for clarity. Clarity about what really happened behind the scenes. Clarity about whether lessons were learned. Clarity about whether the final marriage is built on growth or simply survival. Standing alone can be strength. But sometimes it's just the final chapter of a long unraveling. If you're ready to explore where this story could go next, and the possibilities no one is openly discussing, press continue. So where does this leave us? Kody and Robyn stand alone, but standing alone doesn't automatically mean standing strong. It simply means everyone else chose a different path. And that distinction matters, because when a family built on plural, unity ends with one remaining marriage, the final chapter isn't just about survival, it's about legacy. What will the legacy of this family be? Will it be remembered as a bold experiment that ultimately couldn't withstand modern pressures? Or as a slow unraveling that viewers watched in real time, season after season, until the inevitable finally happened? There's something deeply symbolic about how quiet the ending feels. No explosive finale. No dramatic group confrontation, where everyone says exactly what viewers have been waiting to hear. Instead, it's been gradual, subtle, almost understated. But sometimes quiet endings are the loudest, because they force you to sit with the reality. The porch dream is gone. The shared holidays look different. The once crowded dynamic has narrowed to one household. And the vision that began this journey has transformed into something far smaller and far more personal. Yet here's the part people don't talk about enough. This could be the beginning of a completely new narrative. When a structure collapses, what replaces it reveals everything. Will Kody shift from defending the past to reflecting on it? Will Robyn redefine her role now that she's no longer one of four, but one of one? Or will the narrative stay fixed? On blame, on loyalty tests, on respect demanded, on betrayal felt? Growth requires humility. And humility is difficult when your life has been lived in front of cameras for over a decade. There's also the audience factor. Viewers have changed. The cultural conversation around marriage, autonomy, and power has evolved dramatically since the first season aired. What once felt unconventional but united now feels fractured and cautionary to many fans. That shift in perception changes how every scene is interpreted. A simple conversation now carries weight. A defensive comment now sparks analysis. Silence now feels intentional, and intention is powerful. If the remaining marriage thrives, it will have to do so without the plural structure to justify imbalance. It will have to stand on equal partnership, mutual accountability, and visible growth. If it struggles, there will be nowhere else to redirect attention. That's what makes this chapter so compelling. For years, plural marriage was the focus. Now the focus is emotional consequence. And maybe that's what this story was always. Building toward, not the celebration of a structure, but the examination of what happens when that structure fails. The women who left are building new lives, independent lives, lives defined by choice rather than obligation. That alone shifts the narrative powerfully. And Kody and Robyn? They now define the final shape of what remains. Is this a love story that endured? Or the final consolidation of something that was always moving in this direction? Time will answer that. But one thing is certain. The story is no longer about whether the family stays together. It's about what each person does with the freedom that followed. And that's a much deeper story than plural marriage ever was. If you've been watching closely, you know this isn't just reality TV anymore. It's a case study in power, loyalty, identity, and change. So what do you think? Are Kody and Robyn standing strong, or simply standing last? Was this the inevitable outcome all along? Or did something happen behind the scenes that shifted everything? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your perspective. And if you enjoy deep dives that go beyond the surface drama, where we read between the lines, question the narrative, and explore what the cameras don't always show, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Because here, we don't just recap the headlines, we examine the story underneath them. This is The Truth in TLC, and we're just getting started.